How are you today? Guess you're all doing well. Okay, it's time for grammar, and we'll be looking at active and passive voice. Active and passive voice. Okay, we know what a subject of a sentence is. Subject of a sentence is the doer of the action. Okay, and we're talking about an active voice. It means the subject of the sentence is the one performing the action. All right, now let's look at active voice number one. This is when the doer of the action, the subject, starts the sentence. Example, John broke the ruler. We know what the subject is. The subject is the doer of the action. And in this sentence, who broke the ruler? It's John. So John is the subject of the sentence. He is the doer of the action. That's why you're seeing this S here to indicate the subject. And what did he do? He broke the ruler. So broke is the verb here. And then the object is the ruler. What did he break? He broke the ruler. So we use O to identify the object. So O signifies the object of the sentence here. And let's look at sentence B. The man is beating the boy. The man is the subject. Beating is the verb. And the boy is the object. When we are talking about the passive voice, remember I said in active voice, the doer of the action is the subject. Okay, but in the passive voice, the object begins the sentence and the doer of the action is written after the preposition by. So if you're trying to identify which sentence is active, which sentence is passive, for a passive voice, you will always see by. Okay, that's one thing you need to note. If you're trying to identify a passive voice, you always see by. Okay, in most cases. Example, the book was given to me by Thomas. So if we want to change this passive voice to active voice, remember we are going to begin the sentence with Thomas because Thomas is the person that broke or that gave the book to me. So the active voice will be Thomas gave me the book. Thomas gave me the book. But because this is an active voice, it becomes the book was given to me by Thomas. The book is the object. Look at it. It's starting the sentence in the passive voice. But if it is in the active voice, it is Thomas that is supposed to start the sentence. Okay, so that's the difference between the active voice and the passive voice. Okay, the object begins the sentence in a passive voice while the subject begins the sentence in an active voice. Let's look at another one, another passive sentence. The dormitory was vacated by the students. So the active voice would have been the students vacated the dormitory. There would be no use of by. We will not use by in the active voice. By is only used in the passive voice. The students vacated the dormitory. But if it is a passive voice, it will become the dormitory was vacated by the students. The car was stopped by the policeman. Look at the subject is at the end of the sentence, while the object takes the place of the subject. That is in a passive voice. Okay, so the car was stopped by the policeman. Who stopped the car? The policeman stopped the car. Okay, so when we are changing from active to passive, we introduce by. The car is the object. So the object begins the sentence in a passive voice, while the subject begins the sentence in an active voice. This sentence, the car was stopped by the policeman, is a passive voice. That is why the car, being the object, begins this sentence. Okay, so that's how you can identify the active voice and the passive voice, the active voice and the passive voice. Okay, and then rules, there are rules, just as there are rules in every other thing we do. There is also rules in changing from active to passive, and there's also rules in changing from passive to active. All right, so let's look at the rules to change from active voice to passive voice. Rule number one, the subject takes the place of the object. The subject takes the place of the object. The subject now takes the position of the object. In the passive voice, pronouns also change. I becomes me. We becomes us. He becomes him. She becomes her. They becomes them. The main auxiliary verb should agree with the new subjects. The main auxiliary verb should agree with the main subject. All verbs in the passive voice are always written in the past participle. Okay? All verbs in the passive voice are always written in the past participle form or perfect tense. Example, the ruler was broken by John. Who broke the ruler? John broke the ruler. So that means the ruler was broken by John. The ruler was broken by John. Look at broken. We've learned tenses of verbs, right? We've learned the present, the past, and the past participle. This is the past participle of the verb break. So remember the rule. The rule says that we always use the past participle form of the verb when we're changing from active to passive. So that is why this past participle form of the verb break is used here when we're changing from active to passive. So the ruler was broken by John. The boy is being beaten by the man. Now, if this is changed to the active voice, it will become the man is beating the boy. We introduce this ing if there is an ing in the active voice. For instance, if I say the man is beating, remember when you did verb tenses, we talked about the main verb having ing, that is the continuous tense. If there is an ing in the active voice, there must also be an ing in the passive voice. And the only way you can introduce ing in the passive voice is by using being. Okay? Being is the form of be that is used to change from active to passive voice if the main verb in the active voice has an ing, that is a continuous tense, it's a continuous verb. Okay, so for instance, the man is beating the boy. The man is beating the boy. Beating is a continuous verb. Okay, continuous. Beating, there is an ing there. Don't forget, when we're trying to identify the verb tenses, we talked about that. When we talked about Mr. Perfect's children, has, have, and had, we also talked about ing, the continuous tense. So if there is ing in your main verb in the active voice and you are asked to change to the passive voice, you must also introduce ing in the passive voice by using being. So that's why we have this. The boy is being beaten by the man. All right, let's look at other rules. All verbs in the passive voice are always written in the past participle form or perfect tense. The ruler was broken by John. This in the active voice is John broke the ruler. Who broke the ruler? John broke the ruler. So in the passive voice, it becomes the ruler was broken by John. The boy is being beaten by the man. The man is beating the boy. Okay, more examples of these voices in various tenses. We're talking about a simple present tense. Simple present tense. He sells books. Remember what we said about verb agreements. Okay, the verb must agree with the subject. It must agree with the pronoun. This is the pronoun here, he. If one person is doing something, you must add s to whatever the person is doing. If it is one person, If it's more than one person, you will drop the S. So here, he sells books. If we are changing it to the passive voice, it is it's going to be, now look at it here, he is the subject, sells is the verb, and books is the object. And I told you that when you're changing from the active to the passive voice, the object will take the place of the subject. So instead of my sentence beginning with the subject, which is he, is going to begin with the object, which is books. Okay? And now, remember, the subject was just one subject here. So I added S to what the subject was doing. Now I'm going to have books here as my subject, okay? Because the object is taking the place of the subject. So I'm going to have books here. So it's going to be books are sold by him. Remember, we said that we are going to change this pronoun to the objective pronoun. This is the subjective pronoun. So we're going to change it to the objective pronoun, which is him. Okay, books are sold by him. You cannot say books are sold by he. No, that would be wrong. So that's why the rule said that he becomes him, indirectly telling you that all subjective pronouns will change to their objective pronoun. If it is she here, it will be she here will become her. Okay, they will become them. So all subject must change to object when you're moving from active voice to passive voice. So he sells books becomes books are sold by him. The farmer grows corn. Corn is grown by the farmer. Corn is grown by the farmer. Do monkeys eat bananas? If the active voice is asking a question, the passive voice must also ask a question. Okay, do monkeys eat bananas? Look at here. Do monkeys eat bananas? Are bananas eaten by monkeys? You must introduce by. Are bananas eaten by monkeys? Does she like mangoes? Look at it here. Mangoes is a plural. So I'm going to ask the question. So it's going to be, are mangoes liked by her, not by she, by her? We are changing this she to her because this is the object while she is the subject. Note, in the passive voice, the auxiliaries is or are used often are used before the verb in perfect tenses. Okay, in the passive voice, the auxiliaries, that's the auxiliary verbs is or are used before the verb in perfect tense. B. Present continuous tense. Remember, present continuous, present continuous. You know what the present tense is. You remember what I told you when you're trying to identify the verb tense? I said the first thing you have to identify is the auxiliary verb before you identify the main verb. The auxiliary verb, if it is present, then you write the present. Then you move over to the main verb. If the main verb has ing, then you know it is continuous. So the same thing you apply here. When you see continuous, you know we are talking about ing. Okay, continuous tells you that there is an ing somewhere in the main verb. So the active voice, he is selling books. He is selling books. The passive voice becomes books are sold by him. I am learning grammar. Grammar is being learned by me. Is Ben riding the bicycle? Is the bicycle being ridden by Ben? Note, the auxiliary is are introduced because of the presence of ing in the main verb. Remember, if there is ing in the active voice, there must also be an ing in the passive voice. And the only way you can introduce ing in the passive voice is by introducing being. That's the only way you can introduce continuous, okay, ing in the passive voice. Now, when you're changing later, you will have to change back from passive voice to active voice. So if you see being, you will definitely know that in your active voice, there must be a continuous tense in the main verb. Okay, so grammar is being learned by me. If you're asked to change this back to the active voice, you will know that definitely there must be an ing in your active voice. Okay, I am learning grammar. Grammar is being learned by me. I am learning grammar. Is Ben riding the bicycle? Is the bicycle being ridden by Ben? Okay. Now let's look at the simple past tense. Simple past tense. How do you change active voice to passive voice when you have a simple past tense? Example, he sold books. He sold books. Passive voice becomes books were sold by him. He sold books. Books. Books is not just one book. There are many books here. So books must take the plural auxiliary verb. So books were, because it is past tense, it is books were sold by him. Had it been this was, he sells books, the passive voice would have been books are sold by him. But because it is in the past tense, it's going to be were. Books were sold by him. That's why you have this. Books were sold by him. Mary taught the lesson. The lesson was taught by Mary. Did you drink the tea? Was the tea drunk by you? Look at the past participle form. She fought the boys. The boys were fought by her. Okay, so these are examples of how to change from active to passive voice in the past tense. The auxiliaries was and were are introduced because you're dealing with the past tense, something that has already happened. Okay, continuous tense, continuous tense, continuous tense. When once you hear continuous tense, your mind should remind you of what we did when we were doing tenses of verbs. Okay, how to identify tenses of verbs. That when once you see ing in the main verb, then that is a continuous tense. Active voice, he was selling books. Books was being sold by him. I told you, if you see ing in the active voice, you must also introduce ing in the passive voice. But it is only one way that is allowed for you to introduce ing in the passive voice, and that is by introducing being, being. Don't confuse it with been. Okay? And then the second one, Ebe was carrying the box. The box was being carried by Ebe. They were eating food. They were eating food. They were eating food. The food was being eaten by them. Were you were you playing the ball? Was the ball being played by you? Okay, so the auxiliary was being, were being are introduced. Okay, so take note of that. And we were talking about present perfect tense. Present perfect tense, when you're changing it to when you're changing in present perfect tense to the passive voice, we have bought those articles. Those articles have been bought by us. I have shown him the dress. The dress has been shown to him by us. Have I taken his book? Has his book been taken by him? Has been and have been are introduced. Remember, Mr. Perfect's children have and has. Okay, we have bought those books, those articles. Have is plural, so that means the articles are actually many, not just one. So we have bought those articles. Those articles have been bought by us. I have shown him the dress has been shown to him by us. Have I taken his book? Has his book been taken by me, by him? Has been and have been are introduced when you're moving from active to passive voice. When you're changing from active to passive voice in the present perfect tense, you must introduce has been and have been. Okay, so you see the difference between this being and the other being that goes with the ing in the main verb. Okay, this is B-E-E-N. It goes with the perfect family. Has and have and then had, Mr. Perfect children. Okay, now past perfect tense, the active voice. Remember that Mr. Perfect has this one boy called had as the past. So he had sold books. You know that this is a past perfect tense. And you're changing it to passive voice, it becomes books had been sold by him. I had eaten rice. Rice had been eaten by him. You see, had been is used there. Okay, so that's basically how we can change from active to passive voice. Okay, so please go over it, and you will not have any problem changing from active to passive voice. Okay, you keep practicing and you keep practicing until you get used to read. Remember when you wanted to learn tenses of verbs, it was looking like it was difficult, but when we talked about Mr. Perfect and the family, it was fun all the way, and you didn't have any problem identifying the verb tenses. So it's the same thing with active and passive voice. I promise you, it's going to be very, very easy. So have fun practicing it. See you soon.